Hey, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Sitting right here is a disassembled 3.5 liter V6 out of a 2010 Ford Fusion. And in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to replace the timing chain and water pump on this 3.5 liter. So the complaint on this car was a coolant loss issue. The coolant was leaking into the crankcase. The water pump right here, driven off of the timing chain, was leaking internally, creating our wonderful chocolate milk situation in the oiling system on here. Now this failure was caught relatively quickly. The customer's gone ahead and decided to replace the water pump, timing chains, tensioner, timing chain. We're just doing the primary chain. We're not doing the secondary chains for each of the camshafts. We're just doing the primary chain, and you'll see that a lot of times on this 3.5. We're not really replacing the chain for a stretch or wear issue. We're not replacing it for a timing issue. We're simply replacing the chain because, well, it's got to come off to do the water pump replacement, the leaking water pump. So this is a big job to do. You can see here the engine, basically the whole powertrain, brakes, suspension, the whole works is out of the vehicle. That's probably the easiest way to do this job. Now, it is possible, I suppose, to do it in the vehicle, just like when we did the 3.6 liter on the Traverse. It's possible to do it in there, but we're dealing with a pretty in-depth job, and we're dealing with a front cover that has to get RTV sealant applied to it. You don't want to smear that, cause a leaking issue. It's much easier to just get it out of the car. I mean, to get it down on the floor like this is really only a few hours worth of work if you have a lift to be able to drop this powertrain out the bottom. If this is your first time dropping this powertrain, just note on this specific one, there's no bottom side support that attaches the motor transmission assembly to the subframe. So you might be able to see it, you might not. I do have a jack underneath the engine and transmission holding it upright right now so that it's not falling into the cradle, okay? You don't want to let this engine fall into the cradle when you pull the upper motor mounts that let this engine hang, okay? So yeah, let's get right into it. So there's no direct timing marks on this engine. So the crankshaft doesn't have a specific location where it mates up with the oil pump behind it for that location. And same thing with our camshafts on top. There's a special tool that you have to place over the camshafts on both banks, and we should have marks that are lining up somewhere towards the top here around the 12 o'clock position. And then your crankshaft marking should line up somewhere around the, let's call it around the 2 o'clock position. So I'm going to start by cranking this engine over. I already pulled the spark plugs out to make it easier to turn the engine over, and I've gone ahead and taken a yellow paint marker and marked those alignment points of the camshaft and the crankshaft. When we go to install our new chain, we'll be aligning our colored links up at those points. If you're reusing the chain, if you're replacing the water pump on here and reusing the chain, which that's your choice, you'll want to make sure that you mark the timing chain where it was previously. So we'll spin this engine over, and again, I do have the spark plugs out, so it spins over nice. And we're looking to get the timing marks, or these colored links, all towards the top. And what that's doing is that's bringing the flats on the front side of the camshafts to a vertical position. And now we use this special tool that I picked up. This is a BETOOLL. Link down in the description for this tool. I bought it on Amazon. And what this is going to do, it's for the Ford 3.5 and 3.7 liters. We're going to put that over the camshaft flats. That'll hold that all in place. That's going to lock this engine into place. So we'll get it set on there, and I'll spin this engine over. So there could be a little bit of stretch in this chain or something because they're not perfectly lined up. Let's try to bring this crankshaft around a little further, see if we can get this one to drop down tight against the head. And we're not able to move any further with the crankshaft. So what we'll actually have to do is go against gut here and actually back this up a little bit to get this camshaft to move backwards a little bit. There we go. So now that one's on, this one's a little bit off. So our cams are a little bit off on here. So they don't exactly fit perfect. So, you know, maybe one of two reasons. Maybe there's a little bit of slack in the chain, or two, it's not a perfectly machined tool. Again, this was not the Ford specific tool from Ford or through the Rotunda store or whatever. This was something that I had purchased out on Amazon. So it seems to fit well enough that I got it laying flat on here. Just had to mess with the crankshaft a little bit to get it, you know, get it into that right spot. But now we have our colored link on our left cylinder head here, colored link on our right cylinder head here, or this is where the colored link will go. And then our crankshaft marking is, maybe that's about the 3 o'clock, maybe even the 4 o'clock position down there on the crankshaft. So the engine is currently sitting in its spot that it needs to be for chain removal. So at this point, we will go ahead and start chain removal. So we'll start by removing the VVT actuator housings. And with those out of the way, our camshafts are locked in, our crankshaft's where it needs to be. We can now pull the pin on the tensioner, or pull the bolts on the tensioner. All right, we'll be replacing the tensioner on here as well. Now it's up to you on if you want to replace the guides. You usually want to check them for wear. I'll typically take like a fingernail and kind of go across them. This one does show some wear in it, so this one will be getting replaced. All right, so there's our chain. This is our primary timing chain. So these two up here feel pretty good. I'm not feeling any wear on those. This one's got some wear on it, so we'll go ahead and replace that one as well. Plus it's got to come out anyway to get the water pump out. And now I believe we're ready to take our water pump out, and oh, that's not good. Wow. So, oh, wow, surprised this thing ran. Maybe when there's chain tension on there, it pulls it against the bearing or something, but I can't spin that. It sticks in one direction. Whew. That's a nasty feeling water pump. Let's pull that thing off and see how it looks. When it comes time to reinstall this water pump, there's a sequence, and I'll share that with you guys. These are also a torque and then apply an angle to them. So I like to just give it a couple taps like that, try to maybe break it a little bit loose. It's not ever going to come all the way off because there are two locating dowels in here. But let's see if there's anywhere good I can get kind of behind this thing. Right here is a spot to kind of apply a little bit of pressure. We'll kind of work it back and forth here to try and break the seal. Now you'll see all the coolant right now is draining right into the oil pan. I'm probably not going to end up showing it here on camera, but make sure you get that coolant out of the oil pan, okay? Kind of should go without saying, but we don't want to be starting this engine up full of all that coolant. So I'll be, draining out the, opening up the drain plug, draining this thing out, and then cleaning out that oil pan as best as best I can before this thing goes back together. Oh, of course you're not going to come off with that tensioner, or with that guide on there, I mean. All right. Let's see if we can find a workaround of removing this guy out of the way. I'm going to loosen this bolt, which is behind our camshaft. I think if I loosen that, I can swing it out of the way far enough. There we go. So you're able to just loosen this top bolt. You're not going to be able to get it out because it's going to hit the camshaft. But you can loosen that top bolt, get this guide out of the way. Well, I think it's safe to say that this water pump is toast. Okay, so I saved you guys from the torment of watching me clean metal. But our water pump, where the water pump bolts down, is now cleaned up. I also cleaned up where the timing chain tensioner gets bolted down. So now we're ready to start to begin our installation of our new parts. And here's our new water pump spinning, beautiful and free. Everything's clean, everything's dry in here. So let's do it. All right, our locating tabs are both, or pins are both in the engine block. Now it's just time to get the bolts put in. All right, so there is a sequence to these bolts. They have to get tightened down in order, and then they're actually getting tightened down in two separate passes. The first pass at 89 inch-pounds. The second pass is 45 degrees. Wonderful. So we're going to start with number 1 up here at the top. Followed by number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now you'll hear I am using an impact, but it didn't hammer it all there. I'm just using the impact to basically run all the bolts in so I don't have to do it by hand. Now I'm going to get the torque wrench out and we'll knock them down to 89 inch-pounds, and then we'll go back around at 45 degrees. All right, starting at the top with number 1. All right, now we got to go 45 degrees. Coming to about 140 inch-pounds on that one. $129 inch-pounds on number 2. $125 on bolt 3. 133. $132. And these are inch-pounds, not foot-pounds. 121. 130. And 122 on that one. So we're looking at about 120 to 140 inch-pounds across the board here on this water pump. Take that as you will. You should hit them with 45 degrees of angle, but if you don't have an angle torque wrench, that's roughly what these are tightened down to. Now we can put the chain on. Actually, let's get this guide tightened down first. This guide to come out, so we'll get that snugged up. And these are going down to 89 inch-pounds. Beautiful. Now I think we can get our chain put on. I think the chain goes on and then the guides will go next. Now we do have 2 orange colored links and a yellow colored link. I'm going to go off of the assumption that orange goes on our camshafts, as there's 2 of them, and yellow goes to our crankshaft. We'll see if that's right. So we got orange on that one. See that slack right there? That slack in the chain is keeping me 1 tooth off on this camshaft. So you got to make sure you get all the slack out of there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull this camshaft a little bit to try to get the tooth to line up as it should. There we go. So now our colored link is on the left cam, on the right cam, and then once we get the tensioner, or the guide in, we should be good. I'm going to pull the camshaft back a little bit. That puts tension on this chain here, and we're lined up down there, and hopefully this guy should go back on. Beautiful. So our tool goes right back on, and actually, now that this new chain is on and both of our links are lined up here perfectly and the tension is snug here, both of these tools fit on a lot better than they did when we tore this whole thing apart. All right, snugging down the this guide. Again, 89 inch-pounds on the guide bolts here. So we do have some slack in this chain as we're not, oh, there we go. Oh, we gotta come down a little bit yet on the crankshaft. To get that yellow link to line up. All right, so again, just bumping the cams around a little bit to keep all the slack here on the tensioner side. Essentially is what we're doing. We're getting all the slack to the tensioner side. Now our chain is lined up, yellow mark with the yellow mark on the crank, orange mark, orange mark. Now we can get our tensioner, our new tensioner put in. There's no gasket between the surface of the tensioner and the block here. I just want to make sure that it's clean. It's just clean and dry when it goes together. Oh, there we go. There we go. So when you're trying to get your tensioner in, make sure your chain is down on the crankshaft where it belongs. Makes for it to be a lot easier of an install. And then once again, I'm sure you may have guessed the torque spec on here already, but yes, it is 89 inch-pounds. So timing chain is on. All 3 of our marks are lined up. It's real world. We had to move the camshafts with a wrench. Time to see if those tools line back up. I'm kind of curious if they do. So that one's on. They still sit flush. They're over the flats of the camshaft, and they are sitting flush or, yeah, tight against the cylinder head. So they line up like they're supposed to. Our crankshaft is where it's supposed to be. At this point, it's pull the pin and see what happens. We should be able to then spin this thing around twice, and our tools should fit back in with our crankshaft ending up right about there. The difference here is that our colored links will not line up again. Somebody can go ahead and count how many times it needs to go around to get those colored links to line back up. That's fine. Go for it. I'm not going to bother. My colored links are all perfectly aligned. I have all of the slack in the chain right now on the tensioner side. And time to pull the pin. Let's pull the tools out, spin this thing over twice, and see if we can get the special tools lined back up. So again, crankshaft is sitting here at, I don't know, we'll call it the 4 o'clock position. Let's see what happens. We did everything right. And again, our tensioner is not fed with oil right now, so it is normal for the chain to slap around a little bit like it just was. Bring our camshafts up. There's tool number 1. Tool number 2. Crankshaft is in that 4 o'clock position. I think we're good to go here. When we go ahead and fire this engine up for the first time, what I typically will do on any sort of timing chain engine is I'll disable fuel for a little bit and I'll crank it over for 10, 15, 20 seconds. Let oil pressure build up in the engine before you fire it up and hit idle RPM or high idle RPM, which will be cold start condition. So I'll crank this thing over 20 seconds or so, let oil pressure build behind that tensioner, let it kick out all the way, pull any of the slack out of the chain. But right now our special tools fit back on. That's kind of our confirmation that everything is in time. I don't know, guys. I'm not really a fan of engines that I can't get all the lines or all the marks to line back up after the fact. We talked about it on the 3.6 liter of how they don't line up. I don't know. I just like having that confirmation right on the Honda 3.5 liter timing belt. Those are nice. You spin them around twice, all the marks line right back up where they should. You can be confident in that. I mean, I'm not confident in this. I just like to double and triple check things, especially when you are this far into a job. So next steps for me that I'm not going to be showing you guys, I'm going to get everything on the front of the engine here cleaned, get as much of that coolant oil mixture out of this, drain that oil pan and clean that thoroughly, which will involve a lot of rag time and trying to spray that all out as best I can out of the drain plug. And then I'll get everything back together, put some fresh oil in it, crank it over for a while, let it build oil pressure, run it for a while, and then I'll probably end up draining the oil back out and putting fresh oil in it again. I like to do that anytime there's any sort of contamination in the oiling system on these. Get some fresh oil back in it twice, and I think that should be about it. So I'm going to get to the rest of it here, and that's going to be it for today. So if this video helped you out getting a 3.5 liter engine set in time the way it needs to be, or if this video helped you to realize that you don't want to do timing on a 3.5 liter and want to take it somewhere, so be it. If you enjoyed it, give us that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Also, make sure to check us out on Facebook. There's links down in the description below that will take you there. That way you stay up to date on the most recent awesome stuff that we're working on here at GoTech. And I think that's about it. Again, water pump failed. We put a new timing chain. Guides, tensioner, did not do secondary chains because it wasn't a concern for this customer. Vehicle only had 103,000 miles. So I really appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much for being there. And as always, happy wrenching, everyone. Thank you.